Okay, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to say we're going to give this shir, the Ilu Nishmas, all of those who were murdered, Al Kiddush Hashem. Also, for those who are in hospital, Hashem should send them refuah shalema. For those who are captive, that Hashem should give them courage and they should be returned speedily to their families. And for the families who are grieving, the families who are praying for refuah, and the families who are praying that their loved ones should be released from captivity. That's, we're giving the shir. For those, the schus for them. We are currently in what's called an Eis Tzara, a time of tsar, of pain, of trouble. There's a way of looking things which is totally incorrect, which is because times are difficult, so we have to pray to Hashem. We have to understand that the reverse is true. It's difficult to understand this, but that's the fact that Hashem wants the tefillahs of Klal Yisrael. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of kibbud av v'eim. Now, it's not that Hashem created parents, and because we have parents, that we have to honor them. It's because there's a mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim in the Torah that Hashem had to create parents. We look at the world from the materialistic level to the spiritual level, but really everything starts off as a spiritual reality and only becomes a physical existence much later on, as it chains down to this world. Very often we mistake cause with effect. There's a mitzvah d'oraisa to cry out to Hashem in prayer over every and single trouble. I'm not quoting, I'm translating the Rambam. To cry out in prayer to Hashem in every trouble that befalls the Jewish people, each and every one. Now, generally, the Rambam holds that we have a chiyuv to pray on a daily basis. The Ramban holds that there is no such obligation. But even the Ramban says that in the times of trouble in which we are now, there is a mitzvah d'oraisa to pray. And the Sefer Chinuch writes that anyone who is in this situation, and he doesn't cry out to Hashem to save him, and maybe you know something, I was thinking that on Hoshana Rabbah, we cried out, Hoshiana, Hoshana, save us Hashem. I don't know about you, but sometimes how much of that really comes from our heart. The mitzvah is to cry out from our heart, from the depth of our heart. And then a person who does not call out to save him has been mevatel a mitzvah d'oraisa. He has nullified a positive Torah commandment. And he adds, va'onsho godol ma'oid, very strong words. He has a very strong punishment. Why? Shehu kamese hashkachas Hashem me'olav. It's as though he removes Hashem's specific providence from upon him. Tefillah, Hashem knows what we need. We don't have to go to Hashem with a shopping list. Hashem knows exactly what we need. We have to recognize that Hashem is the only address. And while, it's heartening in some ways to see President Biden getting on a plane to come to Eretz Israel, it's heartening to see Buckingham Palace, or 10 Downing Street rather, or the Eiffel Tower or whatever it was, with the blue and white colors of the Jewish nation. But those colors can change. And as the casualty lists, the figures pile up in Gaza, and the sympathy ebbs away, Ein lanu al mi lismoch. We have nobody to rely on except Avinu Shamayim, our Father in heaven. Let us not fool ourselves. If we don't understand that the correct and only address for our Yeshua. Honor Hashem. Hoshiana. If we don't cry out, it's as though we Meisir Hashkachos Hashem, it's though we don't believe that Hashem is really looking after us. And of course, that's tantamount to denying Hashem. Okay, we can say there's a God, fine, but now is the time that we have to demonstrate that we rely on Him and nobody else. Nobody else. No one else. No one else. Not the Israeli army, the vaunted Israeli army. People say, well, their intelligence messed up. That's not true. Hashem creates miracle for the Jewish people all the way along the line. There's, in the 67 war, some 96% of the Egyptian Air Force were taken out while they were still on the ground. After the 6-day war, you couldn't get a pair of tefillin here in Eretz Yisrael. They sent to America. There's a tremendous hisorus. People saw the nace, but there can be a nace latov and a nace lara. A nace for the good and a nace, a miracle, chas v'chalila. And we experienced that, lara. Hashem didn't want the vaunted Israeli intelligence service. For his own reasons, we were left blindsided. And that's all from Hashem. And we have to recognize that. And we have to daven to Hashem that all the troubles that we're in now, that He will rescue us. The Americans are not going to rescue us. Nobody else is going to rescue us. And don't think, it's very difficult this, because we're so conditioned. We daven 3 times a day, but a lot of the times, all our davening is, all it really is just that we're not allowed to daven again because we're already yotzi. But more than that, we can't just fulfill that obligation with reciting a parak of Tehillim. And I'm not saying one shouldn't recite Tehillim, but what are you thinking about when you're reciting those Tehillim? What are you thinking about when you're davening? You have to cry out to Hashem. Let's understand this idea of the necessity of tefillah and where it comes from, and the power of tefillah. How tefillah can change the world. The Gemara, Maseches Yevamos, says Rabbi Yitzchok asked why all the patriarchs and the matriarchs were sterile. All, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, they were all sterile. Sterile. They couldn't have children. In fact, Chazal interpret the Torah statement that Sarah didn't have a vlad. She couldn't have a vlad, a nuba, a fetus. She didn't even have a base vlad. She didn't even have a uterus. She didn't have a womb. Not just that she had the physical, mechanical processes, and for whatever reasons, as Rahman al-Islam sometimes happens, she couldn't conceive. She didn't have the physical apparatus to conceive a child. And Abraham too was sterile. It says, Abraham mentioned that he was a tumtum. Tumtum is from the word to be sealed, satum, meaning the organs of reproduction were covered over, inaccessible. The Gemara answers that they were so because Hashem wants the tefillah of the tzaddikim. Hashem deliberately, of course everything Hashem does is deliberately, the reason they were sterile, all of the avos, and He intentionally put them in a place where they would pray. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that says, Zevach Rishoim Tovas Hashem, the sacrifices of the wicked is an abomination to Hashem. Utfilas Yesharim Ratzonoi. He desires the tefillahs of the Yesharim, of the straight ones, of the upright, are His desire. The Avos are called Yesharim. The book which describes the patriarchs, Sefer Bereshis, is known as Sefer HaYashar. as we said before, we're accustomed to thinking that we daven because of the tsaros that we're in and Hashem is going to bring us a Yeshua. The Gemara is really telling the opposite, that Hashem put the Avos in this situation of being impossible to have children, sterile, in order that they should daven. Hashem only puts us in a situation of tsar for one reason, that He wants the tefillahs of the tzaddikim. The Jewish people are an impossible people. We exist in this world on the merit of the tefillahs of the Avos. We're an impossible people because they were all physically unable to have children. But we exist because of their tefillah. Now, one of the rules of tefillah is that a person is not allowed to pray for the type of things that the Avos actually did daven for. A prayer to change nature is called a tefillah's shav, a prayer in vain. For example, if someone's wife is pregnant after a certain period where the sex of the baby has been determined and he davens there should be a boy, his prayer is considered a worthless prayer, an empty prayer, a tefillah in vain. It's osa. It's already been decided one way or the other. Similarly, if a person is coming back home and he hears a shout, a cry go out from the city, something terrible happened, he's not allowed to daven that cry shouldn't come from my house. It shouldn't be my family, because wherever it happened, it happened. In other words, we are not allowed to daven for things that have already happened. So how was it that the Avos could daven for things that had already happened? They were already sterile. So we can assume that the Avos were both aware of their own physical limitations, and they were also aware of the rules of tefillah. Why did they pray for the impossible? The answer is that Hashem, the tefillahs of the Yesharim, are the ratzon of Hashem. They were the Yesharim. The Yesharim, the Avos, knew that Hashem changed the natural law of the order of the world, made them sterile for them to pray. Avram Avinu knew. Hashem went into a bris with Avram Avinu, which would be fulfilled through his children. He knew that, therefore he had to have children. A direct contradiction to Hashem's plan. And therefore Avram Avinu, that in such a situation the normal rules of tefillah are abrogated, and he had to pray for the unnatural and the impossible. And therefore the lesson we can learn is the more unnatural the state, the more the situation screams out, this is not, how can this possibly be? The more we have to daven. Hashem doesn't change the world's order for naught, for no reason whatsoever. Harbe shluchim lamokam. Hashem has many agents, many different ways of doing things. He could have found many other ways for the tsaros, for those tsaros to befall us without this unnatural. Where were they? Where were the defenses? It was something unnatural. We need to believe from the depths of our heart that tefillah can indeed change nature. And in point of fact, I might add, without becoming too political, which I don't want to, that the situation which faces the Jewish people, which faces the state of Israel, is an impossible situation. We see the sympathy of the world, which of course, as I've said before, is not something which is going to save us, but limits the scope of the action of the government, slipping away as the numbers rise. The immoral equivalency of the death of Jewish children murdered and slaughtered innocently, and the concomitant fallout of lives in Gaza will weigh against us and will get only more and more. And let's say we go into Gaza, and let's say we do take out Hamas. There's this kind of illusion that there's, these a bunch of people running around in Gaza who are just waiting for the Israeli army to liberate them from Hamas. Hello? Why are Hamas in power? Because the Gazans want them in command. They may not all may be part of that organization. And not all of them would be prepared to commit the obscene acts that those terrorists did. But I can promise you the vast, overwhelming number of them were in sympathy with those actions. And if they wouldn't do it themselves, they're perfectly happy that somebody else should do it for them. And what are we going to do then? What's going to happen? It's an impossible situation, and the only way out is Ona Hashem Hoshiana. Ein lanu al lismoch. Is to daven. Is to daven. Again, the Sefer Chinuch says that anybody who is in pain, the tsar, the danger that we're in, on all our borders, internally, anybody who doesn't call out to Hashem to save us has been mavatal, the mitzvahs, asiyah diraisa, the positive mitzvah, and his punishment is very great because he's removed Hashem's hashgacha. Hashem put us in this situation, in this impossible crisis, because he wants us to understand there is no other way out. Only Hashem, Rak Hashem. And just as he created the Avos in that impossible state, which according to the rules of nature made it impossible for them to have children, so they would daven, he's placed us in an impossible situation, so that we should pray. And pray and cry out from the bottom of our hearts. There's a machlokes in the Gemara how Chazal patterned the daily tefillot, the daily prayers. There's a Manda Omer that says that the prayers were keneged the avos, corresponded with the Avot. And there's another Manda Omer that says that it was keneged the temidim, the korban, daily offerings in the temple. It's a machlokus. According to the first opinion, that the Chazal tiknu tefillos keneged avos, that they established the prayers corresponding to the patriarchs. Abraham established Shachrit, the morning prayer. Yitzhak established Mincha, and Yaakov established Ma'ariv, the evening prayer. And the Gemara brings psukim to illustrate this. Asuch b'sodem, ein lil beis Elokim v'zeh shal shamayim. According to the opinion that says that Chazal instituted the daily tefillah keneged the temidim. This means that the tefillah was patterned after the temple worship, which is called avodah. The avodah, meaning therefore that as I said before, that the shachrit corresponds to the korban tomid shel boker, and mincha is the korban tomid shel ben abayim, the afternoon daily sacrifice of the tomid, and ma'ariv is corresponding to the burning of the emurim on the mizbeach at night, the internal organs of the korban. The Rambam says both are true. Both are true, keneged avos and keneged temidim. How can we understand that? What's the message of that? The pasuk says about the korban tomid, shnayim layom, olas tomid, that the korbanot, the sacrifices should be shnayim layom, two to the day, olas tomid, a continual sacrifice, tamid. Olah means an elevation offering, 2 a day. The Gemara brings a brisa that says that they have to be darshaning the pasuk Shnaim Layom. If you think Shnaim Layom is a slightly unusual construction, it should say Shnaim Bayom, 2 per day, in the day. Why Shnaim Layom? So, Rashi explains that they have to be Shnaim Layom means they have to be keneged the sun. They have to be opposite the direction of the position of the sun. The sun's here, the korban has to be here. So in the morning, when the sun rises in the east, so the shechita of the korban has to be in the west, and vice versa. Opposite the sun, opposing the sun. the morning, although it has to be on the north side of the Mizbeach, but is the northeast or northwest? The morning tamid is brought on the western part of the Mizbeach, so that it's opposite the sun, which, as I said, is in the east, and the Keneged, which is called Keneged Hayom, Shnayim Layom. In the afternoon, it's brought on the eastern part of the Mizbeach, which is also Keneged, opposite the sun, which is then in the west. The Meiri explains that the intent is to avoid any implication that the sun has any dominion. What is the sun? The sun represents the natural cycle of things. The world is controlled by a system which is Tachas HaShemesh, underneath the sun. The system of nature. Hakol Tachas HaShemesh is a phrase we use a lot. The way of the world. It's brought in opposition to the position of the sun. Keneged HaShemesh. To show that the avoda is something beneath, deeper, above, beyond the system of nature, which is represented by the sun. We bring those korbanos keneged HaShemesh, opposite to the sun, against the sun. So now, with this background, we can understand the common theme between the common theme between the tefillah and, as we said, the avos and tefillah. The korbanos are also against nature, to reveal that all there is Hashem. There's no such thing as the natural world. Or as I like to say, to reveal that Mother Nature has a father. The Talmidim convey this idea. It's not the natural system of Tachas HaShemesh which governs, but Hashem's supernatural Hashgacha, which controls everything every single second. Both convey the same message. Hashem runs the world, and He is not bound in any way by the rules of nature. The Avos bequeath to us the legacy of tefillah, as we said before. The idea of tefillah. And the Rambam explains that they are an integral part of the gradual revelation of Torah in the world. This is the Rambam, if you want to look it up, Yad Chazaka, Hilchos Malachim, Perek Tes, Halacha Aleph. The Rambam says how Hashem first commanded Adam to keep the 6 commandments, and He added one when He commanded Noach to keep a 7th as well, and this remained so until Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu added to that the mitzvah of Bris Milah, and as we saw, he davened, he prayed Shachris. Yitzhak added the mitzvah of being mafrish tithes, trumas and maasros, separating the tithes from produce. And he also added another tefillah, at the end of the day. Yaakov added the mitzvah of the Gid HaNoshe, the prohibition to eat, for a Jew to eat the sciatic nerve, and he davened Ma'ariv. And ultimately Moshe came along and completed the process of receiving the rest of the mitzvot, which was the Torah. But it's clear from the Rambam that the revelation of Torah in the world includes tefillahs. That's part of Torah, and that was innovated by the Avos. The mitzvah in the Torah to pray isn't to pray mincha per se, but to continue the path of the Avos. We received tefillah from the Avos. We're commanded to continue what the Avos began. That's our Torah. That's what's given to us at Har Sinai. The basis of the Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, the Avos, that's where it started. As the offspring of the Avos, we're charged with being toldosem kayotze bahem, that their generations are similar to them. The Jewish people are rachmanim, compassionate. Baishanim, bashful. Gom lechasodim, we bestow kindness. The traits which correspond to Yaakov, Yitzhak, and Avram, respectively. Baishanim is Yitzhak Avinu, whose defining trait was Yiras Shamayim, fear of Hashem. The busha, the embarrassment on one's face, is the expression of his fear of sin. So, what I'm trying to get at here is our obligation to prayer, the chiyuv of tefillah, is part, of course, there's an obligation to daven for each one of us, as we've mentioned, but it's also It's part of our responsibility to resemble the Avos, to be like the Avos. Rashi doesn't say that we're commanded to pray the mincha on a biblical level. Rather, the meaning is that by praying mincha, we continue the legacy of the Avos. We are toldosem kayotze behem. Since they bequeathed the tefillahs to us, our obligation to emulate them means we have to pray. And just as they prayed to change the ways of nature, as we said, as they were all barren, so we must also pray to change the nature of the world, which seems to be plumbing towards an impossible situation. Now, there's something here which I want to go into now. This is something that maybe, I'm not sure it should be discussed publicly, but there's a Chazal which makes some rather explicit statements that explain that why the descendants of Ishmael interfere with our living here in Eretz Yisrael. There's a Zohar. The Zohar is Chelek Beis Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, and I'll give you a loose translation of it. The Zohar relates a dialogue between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chia, who were traveling together. When he was asked to recite some words of Torah, Rabbi Chia began to weep and lament the birth of Ishmael. Rabbi Yossi asked, he responded by asking that Avram had a child afterwards, Yitzhak, who would be the holy scion of the Jewish people. He would be the Gaza, he would be the root, the conduit. So who cares about Ishmael? Seeing as at the end of the day, Yitzhak was the one who carried on the Masorah. He was the second of the Avos. So what do we care about Ishmael? Rabbi Chia replied that they both see the same thing. They both saw the same thing, but that he heard Rabbi Shimon lament the fact that Sarah was delayed from having children, and as a result of that gave her maidservant Hagar to Abraham. The Pasuk says, V'Sarai Eshes Avraham lo yolda lo, and Sarah, the wife of Avram, didn't give birth to him, for him. V'lo Shivcha, and she had a maidservant, Mitzris, Egyptian. Ushma Hagar, her name was Hagar. For Thomas Sarai, and Sarah said, El Avram to Avram, Hinei no, atzarasi Hashem miledes boy. The Hashem has stopped me, prevented me from giving birth. Bona el shivchosi, come now, please, to my maidservant. Ulai iboneh mimena, maybe I will be built up through her. V'yishma Avram lekol Sarai. And as we know, Sarah took Hagar and she gave birth to Ishmael. Says the Zohar that Rabbi Shimon lamented the fact, he cried at the fact that Sarah was delayed from having children, and as a result of that gave Hagar to Abraham, and that it gave Hagar a moment to inherit from her mistress. In some way, there was some part of that inheritance which passed to Ishmael. And Avram Yavinu prayed, Lu Yishmael Yichiyeh lefonecha. Would it be that Yishmael should live lefonecha, in front of you, Hashem? He was concerned about Yishmael, even though Hashem told Avraham he was going to have Yitzhak, but he davened for Yishmael. And Avram remained concerned about Yishmael to the point that Hashem granted Avram's prayers for him after he'd been circumcised and before Yitzhak was born. Yishmael has some kind of schus. The Zohar carries on to say that Ishmael's Malach, his Sar in Shemaim, his guardian angel, petitioned Hashem for 400 years. This Malach asked Hashem, does one who has the bris have a portion in your name? Hashem said, yes, he does. The angel continued, but Ishmael has a bris, so why doesn't he have a portion in you, as Yitzhak does? Hashem responded that the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael's bris is as it should be, while Ishmael's isn't. I'm not going to go into technical details, but the bris milah that the Arabs do is not complete in the way that a Jewish bris milah is. Hashem also said to the Malach, and the Jewish people remain properly close to him for many years, while Ishmael has distanced himself from Hashem. The angel nonetheless pleaded for some reward on account of whatever bris Ishmael had, and through the result, also as a result of Avram's prayer that Ishmael should live. Lu Ishmael yichye lefonecha. And with those two schusim, the Zohar says that Ishmael ultimately received a portion in Eretz Yisrael. They will rule over it. This is amazing. This is the Zohar. They will rule over it when it's empty and desolate. Further, it relates how Ishmael will oppose and delay the return of the Jewish people to the land until Ishmael's schus, his merit, merit through his descendants runs out. Just as his bris is incomplete, so his schus in Eretz Yisrael is incomplete. But until that time, we have to understand that we're battling a schus, that they have a schus. So our conflict with Ishmael is not what it appears to be. It's a conflict that comes from their desire to share in the schus of Avram Avinu, because they also have a bris, and they want a portion of the land because the land comes through the bris. Part of that bris between Hashem and Avram. Ishmael has no connection to the tefillah of Avram Avinu. We can only be victorious over Ishmael, which is in a space which is exclusively ours, the tefillah of Avraham. Now, of course, Ishmael davens, he prays, but he prays in a different way. There are only two nations who have God's name attached to them. They are us and Ishmael. Yishmael and Yisrael. And the difference is as follows. Yishmael means Yishma Kael, God will listen. God will agree to whatever I do. This is the ultimate in fatalism. Yishmael is the ultimate fatalism. Whatever I do, it must be what Hashem wanted, because hey, I did it. Yishma Kael, you, God, you listen. I did it, you listen. Klal Yisrael says no. Yisha Kael. Whatever God does is straight. Yisha Kael. Yisha means straight. We are matzdik whatever Hashem does. That is the tefillah of the Avot. We can only be victorious over Ishmael if our tefillah, if we recognize the complete dominion of Hashem over everything. Not to remove ourselves from that hashkacha, not to have any kind of reliance on anything else apart from Hashem. Now, of course, we have to do our shtadlus. We have to have an army, unfortunately. But we should understand, especially we, B'nai Yeshiva, who've been placed in an extremely responsible position. We're davening for the soldiers. Our learning is for the soldiers. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said during the 6-Day War, anybody who gets up to make himself a cup of coffee in the middle of Seder is being cruel to the soldiers. We have to improve to make our tefillah, the tefillah of the Avos, the tefillah which breaks through all normal strictures of the world. First of all, as I said, we have to pray on account of the troubles that befall us, but understand that Hashem only sends the tzorah because He wants us to daven. And anybody who doesn't daven is placing himself where he doesn't believe in the hashgacha of Hashem. It's not a good idea to read the newspapers or to watch the media, because what that does is to give you the false impression that these events are actually being controlled by human beings. They're not. The struggle is a struggle about participating in the bris of Avram Avinu. And if we show that we perpetuate the legacy of Avram Avinu, the tefillah of Avram Avinu, that we matzdik what Hashem does, that we don't, then we win. We're impossible people, born only from tefillah. And supernatural people. Those tefillahs brought into the world, and it's those tefillahs which sustain us in any crisis, and it's our tefillahs that Bezrat Hashem will take us out of this present crisis. Hashem should have mercy on all Klal Yisrael, in all places in the world, in the Tzara Gedola. Each one of us can do a little better. As my Rebbe always says, in Ruchnius, even a little, it may be very little, but it's a lot. Because spiritual things are difficult. Davening is difficult. To daven well is very difficult. But each one of us can try a little harder. Plug in to the tefillah of Avram Avinu. Plug in to the schus of the Avos, the supernatural people who... We shouldn't be here. We're only here because of the tefillahs of Avram Avinu who overturned nature. And in the schus of the Avos, we should be able, with our tefillahs, to overturn the unnatural situation that Klal Yisrael and the world is in. And everybody should see the Yeshua Hashem, Keheref Ayin, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Amen. Amen.